When World War I broke out on the 28th of July 1914, it was just over a decade earlier that Wilbur and Orville Wright completed the first powered flight at Kitty Hawk. Aviation and flying were still in its infancy. The Great War, though, would be the great coming of age for aviation, as it developed from an experimental interest to an industry which would have far-reaching effects. One of the most prominent pilots in World War I was Manfred Von Richthofen, more commonly known as the Red Baron, his blood red fighter aircraft still iconic to this day, alongside one key question: after a career totaling 80 air combat victories, who shot down the World War I ace? As the Great War began, its whole nature changed quickly. With defensive weapons reigning supreme and the notion of trench warfare beginning, aircraft like the BE-2 first began to make a name for themselves in performing reconnaissance. Pilots and observers were able to locate the position of the enemy behind the front lines, and this had quite a significant effect. As the Allies in France defended against the oncoming Germans, the British Royal Flying Corps played a key role in several battles, noting positions of amassed troops, as well as weak points and exposed flanks. With the importance of aircraft beginning to emerge, their role expanded into three categories. With trenches on both sides becoming more complex, it became increasingly difficult for observers to provide an accurate report. Thus, the idea of photographic reconnaissance was born. Pilots would fly perfectly straight and level to take a series of overlapping images. They would then be developed and reconstructed to paint a clear picture of the battlefield, providing a never-before-seen level of detail. Aircraft could also be used to aid the targeting of artillery. Utilising their aerial view, pilots could provide accurate feedback to the unit's position behind the front lines. With radios not yet practical for aircraft, they used message streamers, weighted bags, and later Morse code to communicate with the artillery, providing accurate and timely feedback. Contact patrol involved pilots following the course of battles and providing timely communications on the positions of advancing infantry, again using weighted bags to drop messages from the aircraft. Like all those who participated in World War I, the danger of flying was ever present. At one stage in the war, the life expectancy of a British pilot was just 69 flying hours. But with aircraft playing an increasingly important role, the birth of air combat also began to appear. While there was an air of chivalry between opposing pilots in the early stages of the war, the growing importance of aircraft soon meant they became a target themselves. Grenades were thrown and pistols were fired from the cockpit, while infantry aimed their weapons skyward. Eventually, machine guns became a part of the aircraft itself. The German Fokkers utilised synchronization gears to fire through the plane's propeller, while the French Nieuport 11 placed the gun on the wing, outside the prop's arc altogether. The English moved the engine to the back of the plane, allowing a machine gun to fire unimpeded from the front. Whatever the method, aircraft now had real firepower, and air combat tactics also began to evolve. Replacing the original lone wolf tactics, fighter aircraft would now typically fly as a group in a V formation, with the commander at the front. In combat, they would break up into pairs, with one pilot defending and the other attacking, trying to make a critical hit on the enemy. The basic idea was to get directly behind and above the enemy. This would allow for a clear shot from the forward-facing machine gun, while greater altitude meant greater energy, more ability for a pilot to maneuver in what were typically heavily underpowered machines. One of the best tactics for attacking an unsuspecting enemy was to dive on the target out of the sun. Effectively hidden in the brightness, an element of surprise would be added, reducing the chances the enemy could turn or dive to avoid being hit. Cloud cover could also be utilised, providing an aircraft cover before destroying a target and then returning to the cloud safely. Conserving ammunition was critical, as early fighter aircraft usually only had enough to fire for about 50 seconds. One more area that pilots and aircraft were crucial to the war effort was the home front. The ace pilot became a term used by the media to provide a much needed distraction in what was otherwise a war of attrition. Rather than focusing on the despair of the trenches, the image of the ace became akin to that of a knight of a bygone era, one that could be a hero the home front needed. One of these heroes, and probably the most recognisable pilot to this day from World War I, was Manfred von Richthofen. Born in 1892 into a Prussian aristocracy, his first military experience was with a cavalry unit, but as war broke out and the role of cavalry became obsolete, he transferred and eventually rose through the ranks to become a pilot, under the guide of established German ace Oswald Bock. Richthofen notched his first confirmed combat victory on the 17th of September 1916, when he shot down a member of a British bombing formation, and possibly without realising it, he fit into the ace mould perfectly, marking each of his victories with an engraved silver cup, and painting most of the aircraft he used a glaring red, earning the nickname that would identify Richthofen through the ages, the Red Baron. He was not the most skilled or aerobatic pilot out there though. Instead, he was known to be a relatively conservative tactician who was a sound leader and fine marksman, strictly sticking to a set of rules set out by his mentor, Oswald Bock. Dicta Bock is a fundamental set of rules set out to provide guidance to the first fighter aircraft. To this day, their basic philosophy still rings true. It's a list of 8 principles. The Red Baron was truly a force to be reckoned with. He quickly ran out of silver cups to mark his victories. During April 1917, known as Bloody April to the British, Richthofen shot down 22 aircraft, including 4 on one single day. Richthofen's success led to him commanding several of the German fighter squadrons, which became widely known as the Flying Circuits, thanks to the brightly coloured aircraft the Germans used to identify themselves. Seeing the massive albatrosses appearing over the horizon would fill even the most skilled Allied pilot with dread. In 1917, Richthofen sustained an almost fatal head wound. During combat in Belgium, he was hit by a British FED-2. It caused instant disorientation and temporary blindness. He managed to land safely back in friendly territory, but the wound would leave lasting damage. After several surgeries though, Richthofen returned to the skies. It was 10 months later that the fateful day came for the Red Baron. It's the 21st of April, 1918. The Red Baron pierces through the skies in his Fokker DR-1 triplane, highlighted by its blood red livery. He's joined by a squadron of aircraft. They're on patrol close to enemy lines, flying near the Somme River. Just before 11 AM, one of the squadron's planes is fired upon. It's directed at the Red Baron's cousin, Wolfram von Richthofen. The English Sopwith Camel is piloted by Canadian Wilfred Reed. Seeing his cousin in danger, the Red Baron turns to intercept the Canadian. As he lines up and fires upon the Camel, it pulls out of its attack. The danger has been averted. However, watching the enemy escape back to friendly territory, Richthofen decides to do something that would usually be out of the question according to Bock's rules. He decides to follow it across opposing lines. Watching from higher altitude, Canadian Flight Commander Captain Arthur Brown spots Reed being pursued by the formidable Red Baron. He dives steeply towards the pair and fires at the German, only for him to swiftly turn to avoid the attack. Brown then recovers by aggressively pitching up to avoid hitting the ground. Back on board the Fokker triplane, Richthofen turns back towards the Sopwith Camel to continue his pursuit. As the dogfight progresses into Allied territory, machine gunners turn to the sky and spot the triplane flying straight towards them. They fire at it as Richthofen turns to pursue Reed. Suddenly, the triplane falls out of the sky. It crashes into a field just north of Vaux-sur-Somme. an area defended by the Australian Imperial Force. Richthofen is found in his aircraft having sustained fatal injuries, with one .303 bullet striking him through the chest. The Red Baron had been killed. Soldiers quickly congregate upon the plane, and it rapidly becomes dismantled as they take pieces as souvenirs. The ace was just as infamous on the Allied side as he was famous on the German. The Royal Air Force initially credited Arthur Brown with the shooting down of Manfred Von Richthofen, but through the ages, several additional theories have surfaced as to who really shot down the Red Baron. Brown fired upon Richthofen about 2 minutes prior to the crash. However, the fatal bullet would have most likely killed Richthofen within seconds, as it penetrated and severely damaged his heart and lungs. At the most, Richthofen could have survived for another minute, but even this would barely be enough time for him to make it to the accident site. Ballistic experts have also analysed the trajectory of the bullet. It penetrated Richthofen through the right underarm and exited next to the left nipple, indicating that the bullet was not fired from the air at all, rather from a machine gunner on the ground. There are several gunners who are firing up at Richthofen, and the truth is, we'll never truly know who fired the fateful bullet. Many sources though point towards Cedric Popkin, an Australian who was firing a Vickers machine gun. He fired first at the Red Baron as he flew straight over his position, then again as he turned to re-engage Reed. It's believed that this is where the fatal bullet struck, hitting Richthofen and forcing his aircraft down. While there are other candidates on the ground and even more far-flung theories, it's likely that a version of this is how Manfred von Richthofen came to die. War always involves saddening, cruel, and terrifying turns of events, so it's not surprising that the media and public look for heroes to inspire and to ease the pain. Perhaps it is this reason that the story of the Red Baron is still known even today. The legend that was created on the battlefield was just as important on the home front.